So this week's podcast, we were talking about team icebreakers, development activities, things we can do to get to know each other and to grow together. As you've just all seen, why wouldn't you start with Desert Island Crisps? I think it's quite fun. It gets everyone talking. Everybody has got a point of view on crisps pretty much. The other one that we shared was, I don't think we called it the Spotify playlist, but I've always done this using Spotify, which is one track that you would choose, that you'd share with everybody, that can sort of explain something about who you are. I've done this in quite a few different sorts of groups, and music, again, is quite universal. So everybody chooses a track, you share it with someone who's sort of the overall DJ, I guess, for the day. And they play a bit of the track. When we did it, actually, we guessed like, oh, who do we think that is? Because we got quite a small team. And then people just shared a story about that song. For some people, they go with songs that like mean a lot to them. So there's weddings, there's births, there's all those kind of things. But you also just get people saying, oh, Andy, you did it last month and there were tears. Yeah, you do. You always get tears with this. But then you also get someone going, I absolutely love going to Ibiza. This is my Ibiza anthem. So you tend to get a really nice mix of people sharing different things. Oh, you did Spotify playlist, but guess who's the track? Yeah, great way to get to know people. And also it's great to have music. I think music brings a different kind of energy to a get together and people spending time together. So I really like that one. Yeah, Sam, you like Ibiza music, but you've never been to Ibiza. I think that's okay. I think that's allowed. Other ones that we've done before that can be quite helpful. This one, I think, is probably not the thing that I would start with. I'm not sure I would describe this as an icebreaker, but high-low learning is always a good one. So I tend to think this is better in smaller groups. So if you do this in pairs or in groups of 3, and essentially everybody sharing a high, like from their career so far, and everybody sharing a low, and you're just basically sharing a story. I think if you do that as a big group, that can feel a bit intimidating depending on how well you know each other. I have done it as a leadership team before where everybody shared, but it was quite a small leadership team. So, sort of 6-7 people. It's also takes a fair bit of time. So it's just working out on your agenda, like how much time have you got? And it's one where you don't really want to cut people off. If someone's sharing quite a hard moment, a knotty moment in their squiggly career, you don't really want to be like, oh, sorry, it's 3 minutes and then we're on to the next person. Let's have a go at one of the other ones. Let me know in chat a secret skill that you've got. Let's play the secret skills game. So what secret skill have you got that people might not know about at work? Spotting spelling mistakes, karaoke, 3 black belts. Steve, I didn't know that about you, Steve, but somehow it just doesn't surprise me. You're fluent in Japanese, Charlotte. That's amazing. You can do a headstand, grade 8 clarinet. Susan, next week, bring the clarinet. Learning Mandarin, black belt in packing. Petra, love that. Aerial yoga. What did I say was my secret skill, Reg? I think I said that I'm an aerobics instructor. I think that was the one I shared. Bike ride leader, British cycling. Amal, that's amazing. Winner of beach volleyball and water polo. Claire shows sheep at your local shows. Oh, Claire, that really takes me back to when I grew up in Derbyshire, and there used to be sheepdog trials that we used to go to as a kid because they had like little fairs and they were always really fun. That really takes me back. That's a really interesting one. It's such a good question, isn't it? It works so well. And again, the reason this works is people feel like they belong in teams when people get to choose how much they share of themselves. So here, I think one of the things you have to be a bit careful of whenever you're designing team days or team exercises is people feeling forced to share anything that they don't feel comfortable about. So I think, and we'll talk a bit about this on the next slide as well, thinking about how can you create things that give people choice. So if you say share one secret skill, people can go in whatever direction they find comfortable. If you say share one song, most people have got one song. And if they don't want to talk about something emotional, yes, you might get tears from some people, but if someone just wants to talk about a song that was the first cassette, which would have been a cassette in my case, the first cassette they ever bought, that works too. So you sort of take away this expectation of, oh, you have to be more deep and meaningful than someone feels comfortable being. Claire, I love that. If you want to see some sheep, add on LinkedIn as you've done a post about the sheep. I mean, who isn't going to be following Claire on LinkedIn to learn about sheep after today? That is an unexpected win of the week. Love that, Claire. Thank you for sharing. So secret skills also works really well, but just remember that context of trying to give people choice. Also think about, when do people need to know beforehand, and when is it okay for people to know on the day? You will always get a mix of people who like to prepare and who will prepare that morning. But there are some things where people feel a bit more comfortable and confident if they know that it's coming. And for some where it just feels like, well, actually, it's okay that people haven't had any notice. So these are all sort of icebreakers that I hope are fun without being cheesy. Because for some people, this I think it's always worth remembering, this is some people's worst case scenario. Like having to do anything like this just feels, you're like, oh, this is not what I want to be doing. This doesn't feel important. That you get a lot of cynics and skeptics. So you're trying to just make it like, oh, actually, do you know what? That felt okay. That didn't feel like the worst thing in the world. So that's all we're trying to do with this first bit. Next bit, thinking a little bit about, as a team, how can we be smarter? So if that first bit is connection, getting to know each other, getting started, this is where we're diving a bit deeper now. Like, well, how can we be smarter as a team? And if you've listened to this week podcast, you would have heard of Helen talk about the rock, pebbles, these are my pebbles, and sand, which is going to be quite hard to draw, but let's do that as like those things. The rock, paper, and sand exercise. I don't know, let me know in chat if any of you had a go at doing this before. I've never done it in a room. We're going to try it at our next Amazing If, when we're next together. But Helen's done it quite a few times, and I've done similar exercises. But the point of this, I guess, is to visualize everything that's going on in your team and to see what people are working on. You're looking for duplication. You're also looking for, are people spending time in the right places and on the right things? Lynn said she's used it and it's worked really well. Helen, it's an app called Paper that we're using for the presentations, because we live draw for everything all the time. So the way that rock, pebble, sand works is the rocks are sort of the big, meaningful bits of work. So let's say for us, we might say, okay, we've just started writing a new book, or we're going to produce a new podcast series. And it's sort of a big, meaty thing. And it's often quite obvious to be able to connect the dots between the rocks and your team goals and objectives, kind of what you're here to do. So they're the kind of big, meaty rocks. Usually you don't get many surprises there. People tend to know about those already. You often get, certainly from the people I know who've done this, loads and loads of pebbles. So we don't quite call it the sand, which is sort of the very, very kind of day-to-day stuff that might feel more admin-y, or it just has to get done, or it's probably a bit less motivating. Pebbles are all those like mini bits of work, and pebbles are often where you do get the duplication. So we had one recently in our team. So let me just describe one so you can sort of see how this comes to life. And if we had done this exercise, we would have avoided it. So I was working with our designer, Jen, on an infographic about our Harvard Business Review articles. So we're going to take our Harvard Business Review articles and we're going to turn them into a one-page infographic, different way of sharing information. So I was working on that over here. Over here, what I didn't know is that Vivi in our team, who does all our incredible content, was working with Helen on a sort of swipeable summary of exactly the same Harvard Business Review article. Now, then for some reason, I think it was Helen who connected the dots. So Helen had seen the work that Vivi had done. And then she was like, oh, but Sarah, you're working on that infographic. And it's a really good moment to sort of think, well, firstly, we don't need both. We've really duplicated effort. We're sort of trying to do the same thing. And that's because we weren't joined up. There wasn't the sort of the transparency and visibility of what everybody was working on. And that is in quite a small company and quite a small team. So you imagine what this looks and feels like when you get into kind of bigger teams. And then the sand is all the really small stuff. And sand is interesting. Sometimes with sand, you might want to think, well, what can we stop? Oh, it's taking me 2 hours or an hour and a half to do this report. Is anyone actually reading it? Is often a really, really good example, certainly in big organizations. Or, well, I do a lot of this, but I'm not sure how it connects with our team objectives or our organizational goals. And it might actually be really important, that sand. And what one of the jobs to do sometimes is connect the dots between the sand and sort of what that sand all adds up to. I suppose, when does that sand become a beach is the way that I would think about it visually. And I did find a really good video on this, which I will try and find later to share with you at the end of today. There's a really good link video sort of explaining rock, pebble, sand. So if you've never done it before, and I think someone's saying you can also use it as time management. Jamie suggesting that. I can see how that would work too. I don't know if any of you follow Christine Armstrong on LinkedIn, and she's worth following if you don't. Every Friday she does a blog or a vlog, and she's so funny as well as really insightful. She manages to combine being funny and insightful, which I think is no mean feat. She is hilarious. And last week, what's interesting, Christine Armstrong, she talked about, and I have saved it. Can I find it? Here we go. She does a lot of research into what teams want. And here is the list. So she spent loads of time with teams asking them, what do they want more of? What do they need more of? And this is the list that she came up with. And I thought what was so interesting was that when we think about rock, pebbles and sand, is this point about clarity about roles and those of others, and clear deliverables. And if you think about rock, paper, pebbles and sand, that's what that helps with. And it's sort of easy to say, but actually quite hard to do well and to do right. And I can't think of many teams I've worked in where I've thought, oh, consistently, they've got really good systems for this. Just quite a useful list if you've not seen that yet from Christine. Next one, just thinking a little bit about borrowed brilliance. So this is the idea. Can you get an expert from the outside to come and talk to you? Can you think of a theme where you might all share some borrowed brilliance? We actually do very random borrowed brilliance in our team meeting. So everybody just shares something interesting they've seen. I quite like the randomness because you get sort of a random act of curiosity. But then when we invite experts sort of to do the outside in, I do really think about the topic. So I don't just think, oh, this person will be interesting. I think, what do we want to learn as a team and who can help us? They're my two sort of filters in terms of my questions. So what do we all want to learn? And then who I sort of start with the learning question. And then I think about, well, then who might come and talk to us? And people are often very happy to do this. They're very flattered to be asked. So never be afraid to kind of ask people to come and do this virtually or in person. And then this one, let's see how we all feel about this. Let me know in chat what personality profiles, strengths profiles, any kind of filling in type things where you have to put inputs and they give you outputs have you done? And what are your thoughts on them? So what have you done? How useful did you find them? Gallup strengths, and we love it. Myers-Briggs is interesting. We'll come back to that. Tetra map. I don't know that one, Francis. This is Discovery Insights here. This is one that we've done. I think it's spelled like that rather than insights with a C. Yeah, I mean, Myers-Briggs is an interesting one because I think there is very little evidence scientifically that is accurate. There's some really good, you can read some really interesting articles about just why Myers-Briggs, it's become so popular, but also it's got very little substance underneath it. But I think we shouldn't necessarily be too judgmental about them. Just see them for what they are, which is their inputs that are useful, kind of data for our development. Yeah, so like Strengths Finder can be helpful. But back to this point about choice, what I don't think we should do, or I sort of wouldn't want to do, is say, well, we've done this profiling and everybody just gets to read everybody's profile, and that is you. So here's my insights profile. This is a random diagram from mine. This is from mine. And you can see how weird mine looks, which probably tells you a bit about what it's like to work with me. And you just go, oh, here it is. And this is Sarah. I think it's really important that firstly, you have a facilitator who knows the tool really well. And also that people are invited to choose what they want to share, what feels right, but really interestingly, what feels wrong. One of the things I like about Discovery Insights is they say on average, they think the accuracy is about 70%. So there's 30% of the things in there that won't be right about you. And Michelle, who facilitated our session for us, she was very clear. She was like, okay, pick out all the bits that don't feel right. talk about what do you want to share. With strengths, for example, I always get nervous that people fill in these profiles and then they see the profiles as answers, whereas I see them as inputs for you to further your self-awareness, to question what does this mean to me, and to then think about, what does that mean for my strengths? Has it changed anything? Has it reinforced anything? Has it surprised me? So really make sure, my suggestion is research the tools before you use them. You know, are they accredited by anyone? Can you read any, just like, you know, the do one more click, do a couple more clicks. And then if you can, if your organization can afford to bring somebody from the outside in, there are some really specific facilitators who are very good at some of these tools. So if you ever wanted to do Discovery Insights, we used a brilliant lady called Michelle, who we can recommend. And that talked a little bit about, you know, the kind of, that's the blue, red, greens, etc. You can see on the screen at the moment. I think strengths can be really helpful. Also, when you overplay your strengths, it gets teams talking. That's the bit that I like the most. It gets teams talking. I do think it increases self-awareness. The biggest challenge, I think, with these tools, and I've never seen a team, including ours, do this well, is how do you keep this alive? I'm really not a fan of when some people then feel like, oh, I'm gonna put this profile in my email signature. Like, hi, I'm Sarah, and you imagine trying to describe this diagram here. Hi, I'm Sarah. I am a sort of, oh, not that one. I'm a very weird mix of all 4 colours, depending on where you find me at what day in my email signature. And I sort of go, oh, I don't think I want people to define themselves by a profiling tool, because every profiling tool has sort of pros and cons. Yeah, I think, Will, that is just spot on. I think that should almost come at the top of every one of these profiling tools. You know, read it, be honest, consider it, decide what to do. I think maybe we should take Will's statement and just say to everybody, like, put that at the top of these. Yeah, Charlotte, I've seen that before. People do use Lego bricks to show your colours. So like, oh, you know, red, mine would be at work. Mine would be sort of probably red and then green. But again, I'm like, oh, but then somebody is judging me before they've even talked to me. So yeah, I'm always a tiny bit uncomfortable with that. And then this is where, if we want some things that are going to make us smarter, maybe more productive as a team, what is going to challenge us? What's going to help us to think differently? When we're together as a team, we don't want to keep doing what we've always done. We want to think about, well, like, how do we get new insights, new information when we're together? This one I really like here. This is knots and needs. So actually encouraging people to share a knot that they've got at the moment. So something where they feel stuck, they're finding it hard to overcome. Basically, they need some help. This is quite a safe way of getting people practicing asking for the help that they need. So, you know, you might even give people the language. One thing that feels knotty in my world right now is, and you might try and disconnect it from people. So if I was saying, well, I feel like I'm struggling with, that feels very different to one thing that's a bit knotty in the world of marketing communications at the moment is. And so it feels less about me and more about kind of my work and the area that I'm in. And you could decide to do this as teams as well. So you could pair up. You could be like, okay, well, me, Lucy and Tiffany all work in the marketing comms team together. We're going to share this knot because we'd really like some support from the team of like, how do we get unraveled or untangled? Yeah, wins and woes work really well. Fazana, you shared a knot this morning with your, I'm going to go senior management team is SMT, and it provoked them into thinking. Great. Yeah, we often think we shouldn't share our knots, but actually people often give you a lot of credit when you do, because it shows that you've been thoughtful about, well, I've got this knot and we need to be transparent about it. One of the things that we know actually about the best problem solvers, they are very good at holding opportunity and obstacle together at the same time. So I think often, particularly with senior people, if you can paint the picture of, well, this is the opportunity that we're aiming for, but do you know what, we have got this obstacle or we've got this knot. And if we don't figure out together how we're going to overcome this obstacle or unravel this knot, we're not going to realize that opportunity. So I often do think opportunity and obstacle. Oh, Claire, you've used that. Like the idea of using knots and needs. Brilliant. Yeah, it would work really well for action learning sets. Actually, Nicola, that's a great idea. This one down here, beginner mindset can be really helpful. There is something about everybody being a beginner that unites people in their vulnerability. Being a beginner uses your brain in a different way. And it often feels quite hard because we get very used to being good at what we do. So if there's anything that you can create where sort of everybody is starting from scratch, it can be, it sort of ends up releasing some tension, I think, across a team often. So for example, the one that we've done that I've seen work the best is drawing. Because yes, you'll get some people who are slightly better at drawing than others. But if you've got somebody like, we got Scriberia in to do a big session for lots of our clients, where basically they were teaching people how to sketch note, how to visualize things. And suddenly everyone's like, oh, how do I draw this thing? How do I draw that thing? And nobody is brilliant at it because nobody does that for a living. So I think anything where you can get people kind of creating or making, just being a beginner in something. A good example would be if you've never done any agile or sprint stuff before, you know, doing something like that. Lego serious play is another example. Some of you might have done that before. Oh, Julia, yeah, you coach on visual comms, yeah. And those things you just sort of go, well, no, like nobody's done it before, so just sort of give it a go. It's like when people talk to us about using this paper app, and I'll just say, oh, well, I was just a beginner too. You know, I just sort of learned by doing, and even then, you're like, it's still quite basic. You know, let's face it. So being a beginner, we've done this a few times, and actually Cook, the frozen food brand in the UK who we work with, they do a version of this. It's also really good. The wouldn't it be amazing ifs? You know, giving people the space to just really imagine what are our team, wouldn't it be amazing ifs? So, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if we could get this person to talk about Squiggly careers? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could support twice the amount of people with their Squiggly careers? What are all the ambitions that we've got together? This is often surprising. I think you know what people will say, but you don't. And again, when I did this in Sainsbury's, I didn't quite call it wouldn't be amazing if, because I felt like, you know, should probably be a bit more in Sainsbury's world. But we were doing a lot of work on food waste, and we did a very similar exercise, and we just called it imagine if. Like, imagine if we could reduce food waste in stores by 50%. Imagine if we could save Sainsbury's £10 million and they could give that to colleagues in their bonuses. You know, like you're just getting people to do that imagining. Sometimes you might need to give people a bit of a framework. Sometimes just going, imagine, wouldn't it be amazing if? It's very zoomed out and it's very think big. Some teams are naturally very good at this. Some teams need a bit more of a framework because it doesn't feel that familiar. Susan, you've done Lego Serious Play. And you did it with Serious Academics. Do you know what? It is on my list for our team. So I sort of have things I want us to try out as amazing if, and Lego Serious Play is on my list. And so now that you've said and you've given it your endorsement, we'll definitely put that up our list because it was really good. I have seen teams do it, agile teams do it actually. And then this one is a really simple idea. Any question answered. I saw B&Q do this recently and just thought they've sort of embedded it into their culture. So as part of any team get together they have, and I'm talking big teams, 150, 200 people, and I was there for one of them, they use Slido, and they have Slido open the whole day, and they're all anonymous, or you can put your name, so they sort of have the choice, but they've got so used to doing it culturally, very few people make them anonymous, and they really are asking anything. So, you know, they've got their big boss who's on the board in the room. They've got all of their leadership team. And some people are saying, when will the next round of pay reviews be happening? You know, like I think that's an okay question to ask, but they are just so okay and open with people asking anything. What's interesting about that, I was talking to Tom who works there, and I was like, wow, people are really open and prepared to ask anything. And he was like, it's because it's a repeated behavior. Because it's become a ritual in B&Q just to do any question answered, every time they're together, it just happens. And because people are prepared to answer them or to say, I don't know, but we're not going to lose the question, we'll come back to you. It just builds, exactly as we're saying there, it just builds trust. You just get that kind of psychological safety of, oh, it is okay to say, how is this going to work? Or what might happen? Or to share how a team might be feeling. Or someone asked actually about, we feel like we've got into technology overload on Teams and it's really getting in the way of our work. Is there something we could do differently to help us with that? And you can see the debates and discussions that got going. And I was like, I was there, physically there. I'd just done a session for them, sort of watching it from the corner of the room, just going, this is brilliant. This is the best thing ever. Do you want to know how they came back to people, Ross? I think on the ones I saw that they couldn't answer, they had got people's names, but they answer it to everybody. So they have a Teams channel, just, they've called their channel, any question answered. And so anything that doesn't get answered live in the moment goes into the any question answered Teams channel, which seems sensible to me. And there was someone there marking on the Slido the ones that weren't answered live. So, a little bit of kind of systems in there. Will, you did any question answered in your last role, and it took 3 sessions. That's interesting. Yeah, so you've got to keep going, and then people get more comfortable. Brilliant. So I hope this felt like a useful topic. This is one where we get asked about this quite a lot, and we weren't sure whether it would make for a good podcast or not. But then in the end, Helen and I got really carried away, and it ended up being quite a long podcast. Everyone's like, yes, you did. So I hope it did feel useful. Please feel free to connect with everybody here, keep helping each other. It's always brilliant to see all of your extra ideas. Feel free to put your LinkedIn into the chat now. And I will just see if I can find, unless you have to dash off, where did I put that video? I've got it. Here we go. This is the bit I'm never very organized on. Here's your video if you want it, on the rock, pebble and sand. And I'm just going to share a LinkedIn article that I wrote that went live this morning, all about how to have a career with no regrets, talking a little bit about my dad. So if anyone has got 5 minutes to have a bit of a read later today, have a read and let me know. Feel free to keep putting your LinkedIn connections in the chat. We should perhaps keep doing that each week, because our group's getting bigger and I know that everybody wants to stay connected. Claire, obviously I'll be clicking on a LinkedIn profile right now. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for people commenting on my dad. My dad's birthday today, but he very sadly died back in January. So I've written an article this morning in his memory. Have a read. Have a good day, everybody. And we'll see you again next week. Bye, everybody.